Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I hope everybody's having a great start to the year. Today we're going to talk about the most important concept in generating wealth, and that is a concept called budgeting. For those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Paul Novak and I love saving, investing, spending, and talking about money, and that's what we're going to do today. As always, if you're interested in supporting my channel, smash that like button and subscribe. Comments are always welcome. If you've got questions about what we're covering, if you've got topic recommendations, post them below and we respond to all comments. If you're interested in investing, I am going to post a link below to Robinhood. By clicking on that link, you would be supporting our channel, and by signing up, you will also get a free stock. And for the next topic, give a little drum roll. Anybody know what I'm going to say? Yeah, it's the same thing that I say every single flippin' video, right? I am not a financial professional. I'm just a guy who, to be honest, is really into personal finance. I'm trying to find ways ultimately to generate more income to do the things in life I want to do. I'm not affiliated with anybody. The products that I recommend in my videos are strictly products that I use and I believe in myself. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't even think I'm covering any products in this video, so I guess I didn't need to say that. And with that being said, let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to try something new in this video, and I'm going to try and not say, to be honest, 1,000 times. Apparently, after watching my other videos, that's like my go-to jam because I always end up saying that. And even in saying this, I know I've already said it once in the video and I'm not going to edit that out. So we'll see how many other times I can get through this without saying that word. So what do you think is the greatest way to generate wealth? Anybody? Oh, that's right. I'm just talking into a camera. I guess nobody's going to respond to my questions. By this time, after shooting 5, 6, 7, 8 videos, I guess I should have known that by now. The greatest way to generate wealth is to buy an Xbox, buy Call of Duty, sit and play the game all day long, and spend no money. All joking aside, in my experience, it's been budgeting. And a common misconception that people have about wealth is the only way to achieve it is to earn a high income. I say wrong. That is not how you accumulate wealth. Wealth comes from positive spending habits, not from income. You know, how many times have you heard about famous athletes, lottery winners, all these people with insane incomes and high amount of money, and where are they at? They're broke. They don't have anything left. So you can have high income and be broke. You can also have low income and be extremely wealthy. And I'm extremely passionate about this concept, and really for two main reasons. Because budgeting can truly help everybody, and because budgeting has extremely helped me get on my path to achieving wealth. All right, another reason why I want to talk about budgeting is because budgeting is what allows you to get ahead. You know, since I've started making these videos, a lot of people that are close to me that I haven't shared all the specifics of how much I'm investing, where I'm investing, have reached out to me and said, hey, I think the videos that you're putting out there are really cool and we're learning a lot from them, but we don't have that type of money to invest. Where are you getting, $500 to $700 every single week to put into the market? And my response back to all of them is budgeting is what has allowed us to do that. I want to be very clear. My wife and I both make under $100,000 a year. It's not high income that's allowed us to invest. Truly, it's the power of budgeting and really mastering that over the last 4 years is what's allowed us to get ahead. Not crazy high incomes. So in this video, I'm really going to share our financial journey and our story and how budgeting has helped us. And I'm really going to show exactly how impactful it's been and share my specific financials for where we were pre-budgeting to where we are today. I'm going to show you how we budget, and I'm going to keep it very simple. The process, I promise you, will not be complicated. And now let's get started with my financial journey. All right, so as I've stated before, I've never really gotten into any serious financial trouble throughout my life, but this process of budgeting and really having, an in-depth budget even on our discretionary spending, I didn't start that until almost 4 years ago. And where my budgeting probably began, while not with discretionary spending, but at least with my bills, was very early on. I remember moving out. The story's kind of embarrassing, but it's a true story. And I had rent that was due, and I'll never forget it. My rent was due at the very end of the pay period. I think one of the last days of the pay period. So I got my money, I got my paycheck. I had more than enough money to cover rent, but the problem was I was 19 and foolish, and I ended up spending most of my paycheck, and the day that rent was due, I didn't have the money to cover it. So I remember writing a check. Man, I haven't written many checks in my life, but back when I was 19, I had to. So I wrote a check to my landlord, and I remember I had to drop off rent at his place of business. I went there and put the check in the mailbox at midnight. And I did that so I knew nobody was going to get the check that night. Hopefully they weren't going to get it until the next day. And by the time they cashed the funds, hopefully my direct deposit would already be in the bank. That's not a real good way to live life. And I knew at that point I had to do something different. And it was that point that forced me to actually start budgeting and laying out my bills and making sure that the day I got paid, I paid all my bills first. So the only money I had left over to spend was the money that was left over after my bills had already been covered. And I share that story simply because it's a concept that you're going to see as I get into our budgeting now that I've just carried with me, because for me, it's been effective and works. So once I really got through, the very early years of my life and living on my own, that's when, my budgeting really changed once I got married, right? We had two incomes coming in. Early on I didn't have a lot of bills, and now I had some significant bills, and the stuff that I was doing too for discretionary funds or for fun money later in life ended up being a lot more expensive and excessive as well. And I really got into this like crazy, vicious, bad cycle. And I can repeat it because I lived it for so many years. So for me, if I go to like tax return season, right, I'd get my tax returns, I'd pay off all my debt, I'd be sitting at zero, which was a great feeling. But tax returns always came, we'll say February, March time frame. Also around the time in Wisconsin where the seasons change and it's actually starting to get nice out again. And for me, that's golf season. So if you've watched my other videos, I love to go golfing and love to do stuff with my friends outside. And as I'd hit golf season, slowly but surely, I would just continue to rack up debt, right? It would just keep getting higher and higher and higher. And then as we'd get into golf season and into the summer, we'd have sporting events. There'd be Brewer games. End of the summer comes Packer games and all these other things I'd love to do, these outside activities. And I'd get to the point where as I'm getting into the fall, my credit cards are getting to the point of being maxed out. And I'm not talking about $1,000 credit card here. I'm talking about credit cards with $8,000 limit, $10,000 limit. So just huge amounts of credit card debt. And at that point, right, all that I'm doing is paying interest on those credit cards every single month. And I'd get to a point towards the fall, kind of going into winter, where I started to feel uncomfortable with the debt that I had. And literally, like a hermit crab, I'd go into hiatus, right? I live in Wisconsin. There's not a whole ton of stuff to do in the winter. So I'd literally be sitting at home and just working and putting every penny I'd get on every paycheck towards paying down that debt. I'd make pretty good progress. I'd have to wait for tax returns to pay the rest of it off, and then I'd start that whole cycle over again. And like I stated, while I'm going through that cycle, right, I'm doing nothing but paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars in credit card interest. Extremely stupid. And I'd always maintain probably a balance on my credit cards, not all the way to max, but probably $3,000 to $5,000 that I'm paying interest on. And every single bit of extra cash I'd get, I'll never forget it. If we got birthday money, if we got, Christmas money, if we got bonus checks, whatever it was, I literally didn't get to spend or use any of it. It all went straight to the credit cards. So that it just wasn't a good way to live. And I had to do something different. Probably the only smart financial decision I made throughout that whole cycle was that I was putting away like 15% into my 401k. But I didn't even have a savings or any real savings account money at that time either. So it wasn't until 4 years ago when I met with a financial planner at work for a wellness class they put on that I really got into budgeting discretionary spending. I would say that, for, I don't know, the last 10 or 15 years of my life, I was really good at managing my bills and, making sure I never missed payments, but I never really looked at the discretionary funds. Not only did I start budgeting, but coming out of that class, they taught me about financial performance and a couple of things that we could track to make sure that you as an individual are making progress. And I want to share some of those with you guys to show real numbers for how much budgeting has helped us. So back 4 years ago when I started budgeting, one of the first things that I did was calculate my net worth. To be honest, it wasn't anything I had ever done before. And we were at pretty much right hitting the nail on the head, $200,000. So that's one of the financial performance metrics that I look at yearly. And really to calculate net worth, very simple calculation. If you add up all of your assets, all you're doing is subtracting that from your liabilities, and it's going to calculate out what your net worth is. And since then, with budgeting, if I look at what our net worth is today, and I just recalculated it because it's January, our current net worth is now $500,000. It's actually $502,000, so a little bit over. And to me, it's nuts how we've more than doubled that in 4 years. And I really think a big part of that has to do with budgeting. Budgeting is really what's allowed us to get ahead. And I share that message with you or talk about what our net worth is, not as a way to brag or anything like that. Heck, our financial or our net worth is probably a lot less than many other people out there. But I'm going to share the concept simply in the context that the consultant gave me when I took the class at work. I think it's important to track what your net worth is and other performance indicators just as a way to measure, are you getting ahead or aren't you? It's really not important what my net worth is compared to yours, compared to, I think in the class they referenced Donald Trump's net worth. Really what's important is know where you are today so you can look, next month, next quarter, next year as a way to calculate, are my financial decisions helping that number grow or are they taking them backwards? So really, I use that as a way just to gauge how well we're doing. And for me, the fact that it's doubled means we're doing pretty good. If I didn't start budgeting, I wouldn't have controlled my spending. If I didn't control my spending, I wouldn't have looked for ways to decrease my expenses. If I wasn't budgeting, I would have been spending my excess cash instead of paying down debt. If it wasn't for budgeting, I wouldn't have excess cash to put into investing. Budgeting is what's truly allowed us to increase our wealth more than any other tip or trick I could ever show you. And there are many different ways to tackle accomplishing a budget. What I'd be curious about is to hear from you. I'm going to show you how we do it, but if you've got different ways or tips or tricks, post in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback. All right, so for us, I really use just a basic Excel spreadsheet. There's literally nothing fancy about what I do. There are a couple rules that I live by when it comes to budgeting that I wanted to go over with you guys first, because I think these rules are rules that I've found that are really core to the foundation of how I budget. And the first rule I have is I truly try to break down the bills as evenly as possible. Right? So I want to try and level load the payments that I make out of every paycheck. So just for an example, and I dealt with this early on with budgeting, right? What I don't want to see is if I've got $1,000 worth of bills due in the middle of the month coming out of my first paycheck, right? And I get paid bi-weekly, let's say. And then I've got $3,000 worth of bills coming out of the last paycheck. It's hard to balance all of that. I would much rather pay $2,000 out of the first paycheck and $2,000 out of the second and kind of level load it. And I'm going to show you more about that when I get into actually how I do my budgeting. The second rule, which I talked about earlier, is I pay my bills the day I get paid. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The first one is it really allows me to take control of my bills. So again, if I go early on to some of my budgeting mistakes, right, all your bills have different due dates, all due on different days of the month. And because of that, there were times that I'd miss a payment or, just miss when a certain bill was due by saying, I don't care what the due dates are. Yes, I'm going to pay some of them a little bit early, but saying the day I get paid, I'm going to look at what bills are due during this paycheck and pay them all right away just made things easier for me. And then also, as I stated, right now I'm responsible enough that I can maintain some cash and don't have to pay my bills that paycheck so that I don't, spend the money. But it's still a good concept to get into where the day that I get paid, I pay the bills and I make sure I only have then left to spend the money that's left over. And especially for people that are early on, very young, getting used to establishing a budget and how to make things work, it is a way to make sure that the important stuff is covered first before you go out and spend any excess cash. And for people into personal finance, I'm sure you've heard the term before, pay yourself first. I will show you once we get into our financial situation of how we do that, but I've actually made paying myself first into bills. So when I say that I pay all the bills first, literally for us that means yes, I pay our expenses, but I also pay the savings accounts and things that we value and find important as part of those bills. So again, only the money that's left over would be discretionary spending. All right, and the third rule that's really important to me is every single dollar you make needs to have a home. I think that's so important. So whether it's a savings account, whether there's certain debt you're trying to tackle, or whether it's bills, you want to make sure that you allocate a spot for every single dollar you have coming in. And honestly, and there I did it again. I'm trying to not say the word, but it just keeps coming up. No, but in all honesty, I'll say it one more time just to get it out of my system. Here is where the magic happens, right? So once you get excess money coming in, such as raises or gifts or anything of that nature, once you've got your budget established, you can really take those excess funds and target them against debt or target them against investing. And that's what we've done. So once your budget's established and you're comfortable with your discretionary spending, right, you're gonna, and this doesn't happen for everybody, but for most, right, you'll get a raise or you'll get an increase or a bonus check or something of that nature. And when you're comfortable living on your discretionary budget, when those raises or excess cash starts coming in, you can target those things to productive debt reduction or productive investing because you're already comfortable with what you live on. So that's what's really allows you to generate wealth and get ahead as the years go on. All right, so let's get into my actual monthly expenses or bills and how we budget. All right, so here are my monthly expenses laid out over here on the left. And as I've talked about in this video up to this point, right, we've done a lot of things to cut costs. So you're going to see that I'm missing some things on here that might be common for other people. And I'll just throw one example out there. I don't have cable on this list. Biggest reason being is we were analyzing paying our bills. We realized it was something that we didn't need, and because of that, we got rid of it to help us cut our cost. Another thing you might notice on here is my escrow, right? I've got that listed in here for $400 a month. The reason why I do that is I used to pay escrow with my mortgage to the bank, and I stopped doing that and started paying it to myself so I could put that into a savings account. Again, what I'm trying to do is earn interest myself versus paying the bank and have them keep the money and not make anything off of it. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about in here before I move on is how I've got, pay myself first is one of the things that I talked about in the video. You'll see here, I've got Christmas savings. I've got, for my oldest, his stocks. I've got, their EdVest accounts. All of that stuff listed in here are ways that I've created bills for myself to help pay myself first. So those I consider bills that we're paying on a regular basis. And then as we keep going here, right, we get paid weekly. So I actually break down a lot of these bills weekly. And when I talk about balancing my bills by paying equal amounts weekly, I'm just going to highlight here, these are some of the bills, especially these ones that have bigger expenses, that I've actually found ways to break them down into equal payments and do them every paycheck. And I'm going to show you that here on this next slide. So just to kind of keep the slide less busy, I wanted to explain here for my first pay week, here is a list of how I've actually broken down all of those bills. And something you're going to notice if you're actually taking the time to do the math is I'll focus on the auto loan, for example, that I've got right here at $250. If you looked on the last slide, it said that I have to pay $956 a month for my auto loan. A lot of what I've done on my bills is just round them up to the nearest round number. And I do that just as a way to make sure that I'm always over planning. I always want to make sure that I'm over covered and never under. So, by paying 250, obviously I'm not paying 956. That goes up to $1,000, but for me that works. So the other thing that I kind of wanted to cover is, I am paying, I'll just pick on my mortgage because for a lot of people this is a goofy concept, paying your mortgage weekly. I've actually found that by breaking it down to level load the bills, that's what works best for me. And I've also found that when I've got to pay money to people, nobody cares when they're getting paid, right? If you're willing to give somebody money, more than likely they're going to take it. So if you take some of these bills and break them down weekly versus maybe you're used to paying them monthly, from my perspective, nobody's going to mind if you're willing to give them money. So then as I look here, right, I kind of broke it down now. Like I said, I didn't pull this up at first because I didn't want it to be too busy. But this is literally how we pay our bills. So you'll see I've got my first paycheck, my second, my third, my fourth, and that's kind of how I break it down. If there is a fifth week in there, I'll literally just follow the same week as the fourth week, and I'll explain why here in a minute. But if you look, some of those bills from the previous slide, I don't break them down monthly. And the reason, or weekly, and the reason why I don't is I found I didn't have a need to do that. So it just worked out well that I have these three kind of outstanding bills that are all kind of similar in price. If you look at the bottom here, I'm happy with how this breakdown is. So really, if I look at my smallest week here at $13.60 with those bills to my largest week, there's only a $65 difference. So for me, this is all pretty much level loaded. And if you notice, my last week is less, but that's just because I don't have any of those excess bills rolled into that week. So when I level load my bills, if I've got a week that's significantly lower than the other ones, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to have it where the other ones are way higher. So for me, this actually works out really well. And the last thing I just wanted to highlight, I spent a lot of time in this video talking about locking in discretionary spending. That is really what that city card is on the bottom. I actually posted a video the other week. I'll put a link in there if you want to look at it. I actually put all my discretionary spending on my city card, and I do that to get the cashback rewards. So when I have that listed as my credit card, I don't pay any interest or anything like that. I'm always paying the card in full every single week. It's really critical to me that I stress that if you want to try and follow the plan of putting it on the credit card. But that's where we put all the discretionary spending to get the cashback rewards. And then whatever remaining cash is left, right, and this is important, I use that to either pay down debt or have it go to investing. So like I said, one of my rules is every single dollar gets a home. When I get done going through my budget for the week, any money that I have left will go to Robinhood, or as you've seen in other videos now, it's going to my Roth IRA. Or if we did have some significant debt out there that we wanted to try and pay off quickly, I'd put it towards that. But I make sure that whatever remaining money is left, I designate a spot for and don't just leave it lying around. And that's really our budget. All right, so now that we've covered our budget, the biggest thing that really helped us generate wealth and really put my spending in check, not my wife's, but mine was the problem, with all the golf and sporting activities and things like that, is putting that cap on the discretionary spending. And once we got comfortable with what that cap was, that's really what's allowed us to get ahead. We've had raises come in and other things of that nature, and as time's gone on, we've targeted all that money to debt. And as our debt went down and we had less expenses, our bills went down, and we just had more money to funnel into investing and other things of that nature. And I really think the same will be true for you. The biggest thing is just getting comfortable with setting that in the beginning. From my perspective, as time goes on, that budget that you initially set does nothing but get easier. And I know that this won't be true for everybody in every situation, but from my experience, once my budget was set, I started to understand what my cash flow was and where my waste was and my excess, and I learned to live within my budget. And once I did that, I really was able to start paying down debt, and as I paid down the debt, our cash flow increased. And over that same period of time, we started getting small raises at work, right? And all those raises helped increase cash flow. And from there, I could start to up my budget and pick how much I wanted to up it, but also convert that money into investing, which also increased my cash flow. And all of this for my wife and I really just led to huge amounts of stress relief because we had excess funds laying around that if something bad did happen, where early on, like I've stated in other videos, that stuff all had to go to credit cards. Now we actually had funds and money laying around that we could afford if something bad happened. That's my wrap up on budgeting. Hopefully, you found it interesting and you got some tips and tricks that can help you generate wealth in the future. If you're interested in supporting my channel, like I always say, smash that like button and subscribe. Comments are always welcome. If you've got questions about anything we covered or topic recommendations, I'd love to hear back from you guys. And I respond to all comments. If you're interested in investing, as I always say, I've got a link to Robinhood below. If you click that link, you'd be supporting the channel, and by signing up, you'll get a free stock. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you back here next week to talk about saving, investing, and spending money. See you later.